Mads, when we think about university, there is so much to think of as opportunity. And the question often is, well, what do we do with them?
Yeah.
And maybe as a Christian, often, I think it's easier for us to just kind of keep ourselves in a Christian bubble.
Yeah.
Don't really join in with anything else that
Yeah.
kind of, it feels a little bit wrong, or join in with societies or clubs or anything that has a culture that maybe we don't want to be part of. Yeah. And I think the danger often as disciples of Jesus is that we can just go, well, I'm going to just remain in the safety of my Christian small group or my Christian friends.
Yeah.
But I wonder if, I guess part of us getting ready for university is almost having to reframe how we look at societies and clubs, because I think Christians often avoid those spaces because they think, well, I don't really want to join in with the drinking culture.
Yeah.
People can often opt themselves out. But I think there's an invitation from Jesus for us as his followers to be light in the place of darkness. Yeah. Actually, how do we look at university, and especially maybe societies or clubs, as an opportunity?
Yeah, because we need leaders in the places where people need Jesus most.
Yeah, come on.
Yes, we need them within the church, but we need them within those societies as well. Right. So we can avoid those spaces, or we can join them and not conform to the pattern of the world, but be a leader within that space as well. I had some friends at university and they joined the rugby society when they first started university. And I imagine some people probably quite worried. They're thinking rugby society, renowned for drinking culture, initiation, all those kinds of things. But they decided from the start, actually, we are going to join the society. We love rugby, and we're not going to allow the drinking side of things to stop us from playing a sport that we absolutely love. Yeah. And instead, they took up positions of leadership within the society, not necessarily even being the president, but being leaders of how they led themselves and how they led others really well. And so these two girls decided to start with, they're just going to start praying before matches. And so they would just casually walk off together a little bit further away from the field, pray together for the match, pray that they would just play the best rugby that they could, and pray against injuries as well. And after a while, the president realised that they kept walking off and came up to them and said, "What are you doing every time you're walking off?" And they said, "Oh, sorry, we're just like praying before matches." She's like, "You're what? You're praying before matches?" And they were like, "Oh no." And the president said, "Why are you praying before matches and not praying for all of us?" Wow. And so it was crazy. What then happened is they ended up praying together as a whole rugby team before every match. You're like, that's amazing. And that all started with a bit of courage in them to lead in how they prayed for their team and how they stood up for what was right. And what ended up happening after that is they then led Rugby Alpha for their whole team. So and you're like, all it started with was a bit of courage to be part of a society and to stay true to who they were called to be by God, and to be salt and light in that environment. And it's not just in rugby societies and sports societies that we do that. We're called to be salt and light in every area of university, and that includes stuff like study and our work that we do as well. It's a key part of how we live for Jesus. Yeah,
it's so true. And I think in Colossians it talks about that we live a life worthy of the Lord and please him in every way, that we would bear fruits in every good work. So we can often look at it as like, well, I'm just going to focus on my studies, nothing else takes priority, I just need to do this. And these moments we end up missing out on because we think this is all I need to do. Or for some, we go, wow, I'm here for a good time, or this is all I'm going to do and I'm going to miss out on this. But I guess it's, again, reframing, how do we glorify God with the way we study? How does the effort I put in, or how I do my assignments or turn into lectures, all that stuff, how does that glorify him?
Yeah, and some of it is really quite practical. Some of it is your perspective on how you view your aspect of work and study. And one of the first things I think of is diligence. It's like how you view your work and study as an opportunity to glorify God. And so how can you be diligent in that? You'll find very quickly that some people just view university as a fun time to chill with mates, have some good nights out, join a society, but actually work ends up on the back burner when actually we're called to glorify God in the way that we work. And so how can we be diligent in the way that we turn up to lectures and the way that we get our work done as well? So good. And another way of doing that is working out, where do you work best? I had loads of times where I had loads of ambition to go to the library and smash out 1,000 words, but instead end up having a great time, but chatting to friends in the social space. And some of my best memories are there, but there was still the balance of having fun, socializing with friends, but how do I also find an environment that allows me to glorify God in my work and my study? So I had to work out that I needed to be in a completely silent space where you're not even allowed to whisper, and I just had to get my head down and I just had to get the work done. And I had to find those spaces so that I could glorify God in my work and my study.
Yeah, so good. And I often think another thing is how we pace ourselves. Not sure about you, Mads, but there was definitely a lot of all-nighters being pulled in order to get the assignments in on time. And for me, that was poor managing of my time or pacing myself. But often we could get ourselves burnt out because number one, we're not managing our workload well. But also secondly, I don't think we fill our time with things that bring us life. And I'd encourage people watching this and think through and actually plan in. Maybe it's getting out with nature or doing something with friends and maybe an activity that brings you life to go, actually we want to be replenished in not just our mind, but our heart, our soul, our bodies. And I think it's important that we plan our even week with enough rest and also activities and things that actually excite us and make us want to do. And maybe this is something you might have already thought about in your church, or maybe you haven't, is Sabbath. The idea of having a day a week where we rest. And I love that it's a biblical principle. I love that when we look all throughout scripture, we see the people of God taking a day, or sometimes it's a year, over 7, where they intentionally rest, where they stop. It's all tools down. We want to rest. And I think we can often not do that with work because we think, oh my God, if I don't do work for a day, like what's going to happen? And I think there's something so powerful about us going, I'm going to Sabbath. There's a day in the week where I'm going to not do work and I'm going to rest because actually, number one, it replenishes us. Gives us a greater perspective of our work, our life, but also it helps us come back to work with a clearer mind and a clearer focus.
It's good. Yeah, it's interesting seeing Sabbath and rest as an opportunity, but it really is. And it was an example that God set from the very beginning in Genesis to rest on the 7th day. And so we're honoring God by resting really well and taking that Sabbath. And I wasn't always great at that at university, but I think that is where the family of the church is really helpful. They held me accountable to that. And it meant that actually I did take rest, and I received so much from the church during my time that there were so many times where there were loads of other examples of things that I benefited from because of the family of the church, like when my car broke down and someone came to pick me up from the church, or I burnt my hand and needed to go to A&E and they took me to A&E and sorted all of that out, or I wanted a home cooked meal. So there's so much you receive from the church, but I suppose another opportunity is what you can give to the church, so that we're not actually viewing it as a place where we consume, but it's something that you can contribute to as well. And so I learned very quickly at university that there were so many opportunities within the church as well. Yes, opportunities at uni, but opportunities to continue to grow as a leader within the church. So I was leading a small group in my university halls in my first year. I joined Street Pastors, which isn't necessarily the physical church, if that makes sense, but it was being Jesus on the streets. It was chatting to vulnerable adults on the streets. It was helping someone to get home who maybe had had a little bit too much to drink, but it was a way for me to be a leader and grow as a leader in that way as well. I joined the welcome team, kids team, a load of things like that, and found opportunities to give to the church and to see that as a way to live for Jesus and to grow to become more like Jesus as well.
Yeah, so beautiful. And I know we've spoken about this before, but I think the opportunity of being part of an intergenerational family is beautiful. The church I was part of in London a few years ago. I remember once we had an international student join us, and it was the first Sunday he was going to come to our church. So actually that morning I drove to pick him up and brought him to church, and to just see him in our church family. He was among people that spoke his language. He's away from home for the first time in a foreign land, a whole new culture. So for him to be part of a church family that spoke his language, understood him, was a gift for him. But I love at the end something happened. One of our aunties in church, without any prompt, it wasn't something that we did all the time, but she just took it upon herself. I just remember her taking him out onto the main high street where our church was, took him to a local Indian store, and basically just bought him shopping for the whole week.
Yeah.
All the spices he'd need, anything that he would need to kind of get through, she bought it for him. And then she took him to a clothes shop, bought him jackets, scarves, hats, gloves, whatever he needed to navigate that season. She did that. And I remember her and him walking back to my car as they loaded my car. I was going to drop him off. And I will never forget this conversation that happened between the two of them. He looked at her and said, "Why are you doing this? You know, like, why? You didn't have to do all this for me." And her response for me is, what a gift that church can be. And she just looked at him and went, "Well, because you're just like my son."
That's good. Yeah.
You know, and I was like, isn't this the picture, or also the opportunity of what a church can be?
Yeah.
The opportunity to be with disciples of Jesus who've journeyed ahead of us. We get to learn from what that auntie modeled that day, he will never forget.
Yeah.
We have an opportunity to learn. But also I love that our church was a place where everyone played their part. So our media team was run by students and youth. Everyone was serving. So that thing of like being part of a church family and looking at it as an opportunity, not just to receive, and we do receive in loads of ways, but we also get to give is powerful. So I guess, thinking about our time at university as an opportunity is I think super important, because we get to be people as disciples of Jesus who get to be beacons of hope and light in the places of darkness, whether that be societies or clubs with people who don't yet know him, whether that be in the way we study and how we approach our work, how we do it, and how we help others around us, or in the church family. We have an opportunity to be a people who carry not just the hope of Jesus, but the light of Jesus in places that needs it the most.
Good. Colossians 4 says this: "Be wise in the way that you act towards outsiders. Make the most of every opportunity. Let your conversation always be full of grace, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how to answer everyone." There is such an opportunity at university to be salt and light to those around you. I wonder what God is preparing in you now for what He's prepared for you at university. And how can you have your eyes wide open to all the opportunities that God has for you? For more resources on preparing for university, including the Student Linkup Sessions workbook, visit fusionmovement.org.